The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, good morning, everybody. This is Lance Yoder from Clear Process Solutions. Welcome to our November. It happens to be the second one in November since we pushed our October one late. Welcome to the November WEBtips, and we'll just wait 1 minute here. As I see some people are still joining, we'll wait for just 1 minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, it's a couple minutes after the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to everyone. Just a few housekeeping notes at the beginning. Right now, everyone is on mute to minimize any background noise. There may or may not be polls throughout the session, just depending on how it goes. And if you have questions during the session, please feel free to move over to the GoToWebinar application on the right side of your screen or wherever you have moved it and type in a question. And we have other team members that are listening from CPS that will help answer those questions along the way. And Beth is joining us. And Beth, feel free to interrupt me anytime there's a question that we think needs to be answered right at that time.
Sounds good, Lance.
All right. Well, that's a good start for a Microsoft PowerPoint. Let's give this a shot again. All right, so we won't go in full display mode, so we can avoid that. But thanks for those who have joined many times. This is our, 11th session for the year. And welcome to those who have not joined us for the WEBtips before as your first time. Welcome again. Just an introduction to what the WEBtips is for those folks. These sessions are intended to be, half-hour, 45-minute sessions around some tips and tricks regarding the usage of the Winshuttle transaction, query, central, and direct tools, as well as the workflow and forms tools. So every other month we try to alternate topics. So this month we're doing the query and transaction tips, and then next month we'll be doing the web forms and workflow as well. So as your lovely host, my name's Lance Yoder again. I've been an SAP user now for a long time. Came from the industry of Rockwell Automation. Manufacturing engineering is where I started doing SAP Go Lives, process improvement, that type of thing. So I have a small piece of my heart for process improvement, and that's what I like Winshuttle, because that enabled me to do that, and love working with the product. So chemical engineer, so that's why the little crazy science lab there. Project management and Six Sigma certified. So that's just a little bit about my background. So looking at the agenda for today, this is the last one for the year for transaction and query. So right now this is being offered as a free service for those folks for the year of 2014. Next year we'll be reconsidering what kind of WEBtips we'll be having. There could be different sessions, there could be other sessions, but this is going to be the last transaction and query one for this year for sure. So some of the topics we're going to cover are query. We're going to look about using a recording to start your query instead of going right to tables, using the result file as an input to your query, and using Excel expressions. And then for the transaction side, we're going to take a foray into manually updating the mapping editor. So many of the things that we're going to be doing today are going to be on the fly. We're going to be developing as we go, so you can see all the steps that are going. Now, I practiced it yesterday, so I do have my notes about what we're going to do, so hopefully everything will fall in line from what I did yesterday. All right, so the first topic is with query and starting with the recording. So let's bring up query. So I have query here, And before I do anything, I want to make sure that I have my default locations in the right spot so I don't have to keep changing my folders. So on my desktop, and November tips and tricks, and then demo. And then I want to do the same thing for my Excel files. Okay, so this is a repeatable tip that we always do at every web tip. So what I've just done is I've changed my default locations. So every time I open a query script or an Excel file within query, it's going to go to those locations. So if you're constantly going to the same place to open up scripts, you can go into Tools, Options, and set your application defaults to do that. So we're going to go ahead and create a new script, a new query script. So most of the time I use this create query, and what create query does is allow you to go right to a table. This is probably what most people are used to seeing. It'll take you right to the table editor view, and you can start loading your table. So as I connect to my SAP environment here, should load up what kind of data set I want to use. I pick tables, and this is what you get, and you can start adding tables to your query builder just manually by typing them in, by searching for them, something of that nature. But what we're going to do this time is we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to use this create query using SAP recording. So what this option allows you to do is record a transaction, and then the query will follow along the fields that you've touched, and then go find the tables that are associated with those fields that you touch. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to do a simple material master update, and we're going to take a look about how that works. So referring back to my notes here, all right, so I'm going to do an MMO2 transaction, and then we will say test for tips. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and continue on there, and we should launch an SAP session. All right, SAP session. Okay, here it is over on this screen. All right, so I'm going to enter in my material just like I would normally do any other Material Master update. And I want to change the description because in this case, I want to be able to get the description of the material and the reorder point at the storage location. So I'm going to mimic myself doing those actions so query can capture those bits of information. Again, I want to see where the description is and the storage location specific reorder point. So I'm going to change the description so query will capture me doing that. Then I'm going to go to MRP4. All right, and then down here I have a reorder point. Let's change it and make it 14. So then I've touched the fields that I'm interested in downloading with query. I've updated them, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Okay, so it's capturing all the items that I touched and turning it into table information. In a minute here, query will pop back up and search the data dictionary for those fields. All right, so it's searching through the data dictionary for all those fields that I touched, and in a moment here, I'll bring you back to the window, and I should have those tables added into my query section. All right, so it's finished adding those here. So as you're going into your table builder, if you would come in the normal way, you would see all of the modules, and then there's a section called recorded transaction codes. And you'll see that these are all the items that I tested previous times, and this is the MMO2 that I've done today with the description test for tips, because that's what we were looking at. So now I know that for the fields that I touched during that transaction, these are the tables that were involved. Sometimes you're going to get, those checkboxes when I hit select fields, it's going to capture those things as well. So just be aware that some of these tables you may not necessarily need in your query, because it captured me hitting the org levels when I typed in plant 1000 and storage location 1 and so on. But we can see, here are some tables that I want to add to my view. Okay, and I picked the material master because I think many of us are familiar with that table structure. And we know that since my goal was to capture the description as well as the storage location information, these are indeed the tables that I would have pulled out had I just gone into the table builder and added those tables directly. So it does capture exactly where I was at. So this is handy when you're not sure exactly where that data lies, because sometimes the help shows you a cluster table and it's not always obvious where the true source of that information is. So you can record yourself doing a transaction as a start. All right, so now I'm going to move on, I believe, to the next item. So I want to map this query to make sure it's working, and then I'm going to move on to the next tip. All right, so let me go ahead and map this in. So I want description. So I have description. Let's make sure the language is in English. Okay, the reorder point, I need to find the reorder point, so I already brought that in, the reorder point, have the material number. I would like the storage location number and the plant. So I should have a bit of information here. All right, and then we will go ahead and map those. All right, I had one extra column there, so we're going to go ahead and save this. So it took me right to my demo file. And then we're going to go ahead and start mapping this information. All right, so we'll do column A. All right, so we should be all set here. Okay, so I'm going to make one change to the query here. I want to make this an in. So for the next tip, I'm going to use the result file as the input to this query. So if I would normally use an in, so I'm going to say where material number is in a list. In the previous version of Winshuttle, if I want to use Excel file or a text file as a document, I had to pick a different file. So using the in command, I'm able to say, go find all the materials that match this list, and I can have that list in an Excel file. Well, previous to 10.7, I had to have that list in a separate Excel file. Now using this option here, use result file, this means whatever file I'm outputting the data to, that's where I'm going to have the list of inputs. So previously I had to have my inputs in one sheet and my outputs, the data that I'm extracting, in another sheet. Now we're using this option, so this is a new option in a recent version. Using this option, you're able to use that same input file, whatever it is at the time of run, to maintain that bit of information. So I'm going to change this to sheet 2 and push that up to the top. Okay, so now for my material is going to be from a list of something in this spreadsheet. Okay, and I want to clear out this information. We'll create a new sheet. We'll go ahead and do that. Oh. All right. So we're going to go ahead and run this query, and let's take a look at the spreadsheet that I have. So this is the output file that I've selected, the material SLOC information. So that's the one I've selected right here, material SLOC information, and I'm using sheet 2 of that Excel file to show all of the materials I want to go search for. So I want to search for material M-01 through M-27, and I want to go get some information regarding those files, and I'm going to put the results on sheet 1. So we'll go ahead and run that. Okay, so again, my material is going to be coming from this list, so I don't have to point to another file anymore. It's using the same result file. Whatever I picked up here, that's where it's going to bring in that information. And then I've hard-coded the language of the description to be English, so I don't get more than one return back.
Lance, this is Beth. While that's processing, we did have a question come in.
Okay.
The question is, do you actually have to make changes to a record and save them to identify the fields you want in your query, or can you just fake the changes without making an actual save change?
You could cancel out at the end because it'll record. Instead of hitting save, you would be able to just hit the red X or the yellow back arrow to exit, and it won't save the transaction, but it will still capture those items that you've done. So when you read the documentation on using that, they say, any changes that you make on this will be committed. So I did the commit. I hit the save button, but I could have easily done the exit, and it still would have captured that action. It's just like recording a transaction script. It's going to capture whatever button you hit. So in this case, I've changed those items, and if you exit, it would still capture those fields. So that's a good question. Okay, so I've downloaded my results. And let's take a look at those. Okay, so here we go. There's some other information over here that we will tend to a little bit later. So I have all my results. Okay, so I have my reorder point. You notice it says 14 because that's what I changed it to. And I have all these other ones that are at 0. So many of the reorder points were not even filled in for those materials. All right, so let's see where we're at here with far as the tips. Okay, so we started with recording, and we used the result file as an input. So let's take a look at using Excel expressions within the query. So let's say I have to do this at the end of every quarter. We're almost at Christmas time, and maybe I'm in the retail industry. And the reason I'm doing storage location reporting is because I know for our seasonal items or our hot items right before Christmas, we want to bump up those reorder points. So instead of applying a formula in Excel, if I want that formula to be the same every time this script runs, this query script, I can put that Excel formula inside of the query script. So if I go to the Update Mapping section, you'll see these Excel expression columns, Transform Original Mapping and Expression Evaluation Description. So let's go through what these are. They're not really used too many times by the folks that I've worked with in the past, but it's a good thing to have if you need to pass over a script to someone else to run, and whatever formulas have to be constant. Okay, so what I'm going to do, the Excel expression, is this is where you would put your Excel query. So let's say this is where I want this function to be, column G. I'm just going to put in, I want my reorder point to be the existing reorder point times 2, plus 5, something of that nature. Okay, so that gives me a new reorder point of 33. So I'm going to take this formula and I'm going to go put it in my query. Okay, so what cell you want to have here is the first cell you want, or the first row you want this expression to be applied to. So if I would have started at B6, if I would have started at B6 over here, when query did its work, it would have populated starting from here on down with the information, not applying that formula to the first 5. So it's going to start right here, and much like Excel, it's going to increment. It's going to increment these cell numbers. So B3, B4, you can see it increments. We're all familiar with those Excel features. So you want to start your formula in the first row that you want that expression to start in. Same with the expression cell. I was in F, column F2. That's where I want the result to be. And now this is where the header is, new reorder point. Okay, so that's going to be the header for this column, and it'll put that information here in column G. So let's rerun the query and see if that works. All right, well, maybe I need to put it in column G. I put my expression cell as the log column and it caught me. All right, so let's try this again. First, let me delete that so we can see it update, because all the other ones are just going to be a 5. Okay, so with any luck, that worked. Okay, so it applied that formula to column G. So all the way down, we have column G with a 5. And the first one being 33, just like we thought. So let's take a look at the other checkbox that is in here. Transform original mapping. What this would do, because I'm dealing with column material description. Okay, reorder point. So I put an Excel expression in there. It wasn't even pertaining to the right row. Mapped to column A. And just took and applied that formula. So I just put it in there. It had nothing to do with the description, and it seemed to work out just fine. I should have probably put it down here in the reorder point area, but I guess it really doesn't matter. So that's something we learned there. So transform original mapping. This is where that would be a problem if I use this checkbox. This checkbox is going to overwrite the mapped column with the result of this calculation. So since I have this mapped to the wrong one here in material description, it would take the value that is calculated and put that back into column A. So in this case, it would have overwrote my description with the number 33. So it's going to use this column, the evaluation cell, it's going to use that as a temporary cell to do that equation, and it's going to take the result of that and force it back into this column, the mapped column, if you use this checkbox. So let's move this down here. And let's try that again. All right, we're going to transform the original mapping this time. Okay, I guess it needs a double click. All right, so let's see if this works. Okay, there we have it. So it blanked out this column, so it did its temporary calculation and then put the results back over here. So that's how those features work with Excel functions. Okay, now let's try to update our material master with these new items. So I've extracted my information that I want, I've updated with my new formula, and I want to push that data back into SAP. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new transaction to do just that. So I do MMO2. All right, in this case, we're going to use batch input mode. So that'll lead us into our next tip afterwards. All right, again, it came up over here. So I'm going to select my material, -01. I'm going to select MRP4 directly. And my plant, let's see, 1000. All right, and then I'm going to update my reorder point. And then save. All right, so I'm going to use the same spreadsheet as my input to that transaction. So after it's done thinking, turning all of my recording into the Winshuttle script, we'll start working on that one. So this might be a good time. Are there any other questions out there, Beth?
Not yet, Lance.
Okay.
Feel free to type in, everybody, if you've got.
All right, so it looked like it came back
Questions.
relatively quick, so we're going to go ahead and I'll move this over here so I can map in the columns as needed. So I have material coming from column C, and then plant is coming from column E, storage location from D, and then my reorder point is coming from column B. Okay, so we're going to save this. We're going to do MMO2 update.
So, Lance, the question did come in that this is all tying together now, right? The transaction script, the update script is linking to what you did on the query side.
It's working together, but the scripts are not physically linked. So in transaction, you can link the scripts. You can use the link transaction option. But it's now just sort of working together as a process. So first I'll run the query, and then I'll do my update. Because I have the Excel calculations in there, I don't even need to refer back to my Excel file. I can just download it. Query's going to apply my formula to my spreadsheet, and then I could immediately run transactions should I've already had the transaction script created. But they're not physically linked, as in where I hit query, it'll run the query and then run transaction, because those are not, unfortunately that's not possible that I'm aware of right now to link query scripts to transaction scripts. You can link query scripts to query scripts and transaction to transaction, but not across. Okay. So let's pick the data file that I've used before. All right, and we're just going to let this go ahead and run. I want to change my log column to H. Okay, and then we're going to let this run.
Once this is done, Lance, we did get another group of questions. It might be a good time to stop when you get through this piece. Okay?
Okay, that sounds good. So you can see it's working here, and I'm getting a number of errors.
So even Lance Yoder gets errors.
Yeah. Well, this is going to lead us into our next tip.
So with purposeful.
Okay, so it's going to go ahead and run. I'm going to pick one of these materials that had seemed to fail, and we're going to try to do that transaction manually. So we have M-01, plant 1200, storage location 120. So let's see if my SAP session timed out on me. Of course it did, so let's log in again. Then we're going to take a look at MMO3. Let's try MMO2 so we can try to replicate. I'm going to go right to the MRP4. What plant did I say? 1200. Storage location. Okay, so what happened, I got this error down here that says no, or this message saying no storage location specific data exists. So even though there's a record in the database that this has been extended to the MARD table, there's not actually a material master section for that storage location. There's no MRP4 data for that storage location. So that's why it's failing. So even though it downloaded a value of 0, we're trying to update it to 5, the update isn't working. So I would have to go back and do an MMO1 on all of these materials before I can update them. So I need to create that. Well, one thing that we can do, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So let's take a look and see if our transaction finished. Okay, looks like it did. Now remember, this is an MMO2 transaction. If I wanted to go create those storage locations in the material master and then update them, potentially I'd have to make another script or maybe do a mass update in SAP or something of that nature. So let's see if we can get something to work here. We'll give it a shot. So inside the mapper, in the edit section, we have this editor function. Okay, and this is full of all the good stuff that Winshuttle passes to SAP to make your transactions work. So here I have this transaction. TX, the plus TX indicates that's the function for what transaction it's going to do when I load it. So as you recall, as we see here, I recorded this in an MMO2 situation. I'm going to change that to MMO1. Save it. Exit. So now I've changed my MMO2 transaction to an MMO1 transaction. Now let's run on errors and see what happens. I'm in that material, so that's not going to work. All right. It's running. Let's look at the Excel file. There we go. We are creating those extensions. So my initial intention was to go update the MRP record, go over to MRP4 and update the reorder point, but then when I did that, I found that it didn't actually exist. It wasn't extended to the storage location appropriately. So I changed my T code inside my mapper to an MMO1 and reran it, and now it's creating all of those items. So let's take a look at that material now inside that storage location. All right, now we have our reorder point and no green message saying that it doesn't exist. So that's a neat little trick. If you've ever come across something like that, now oftentimes it doesn't work because the screens are a little different between a create and a change, but sometimes it does. So it's worth a shot. I recommend saving the script that you're working with. So I should have saved that MMO2 script as a separate script before I went and tried to change the T code. That way if something happened and it went bad, I still have my other script that's still working. I can start from there. So that's one little trick about updating the mapper. So while we're in the mapper, let's see what the next one is. So we talked about using Excel expressions. Beth, what were the questions? This might be a good time before moving on to the next one.
Sure, we had a couple. One question was regarding multiple query scripts. If you want to run multiple query scripts and they populate data in different sheets, is there a way to specify the different sheet in the second query?
Right. So when you do that, what you want to specify in the query itself is you want to make sure that you save the query with the sheet that you have. So let's say I've already done my first query script and I'm moving on to the second query script, and this is what's on the screen. So when I save the query script, I want to put the sheet name in that sheet column, and then I want to save it. That way, when this query opens as the second script, it's going to use that sheet name. And further, in your first script, you want to make sure that you're carrying the file and maybe the start and end row, but you do not want to carry the sheet. So if I carry the file and start and end row, it would carry that from the first to the second. But if I don't carry the sheet forward, it will use the sheet name that's in the script. So if I had my script 1 had sheet 1, and script 2 has sheet 2, and I had my settings like this when I'm linking, so on the first file I would have it like this, it would carry the file forward, so I'm using the same Excel file for my results, starting at the same row, row 2, or whatever your output location would be, and then you leave the sheet blank, so when the second one opens, it inherits that sheet name. Because if you use that sheet carry forward setting, it's going to overwrite this script with whatever your first one was, or wherever you came from when you open that script. Same thing with start and end row. If you don't want to pass your start and end row forward to your link script, it'll just default, your link script will just use the start row that you've indicated in here. So really these things are overwriting this section here in your link script. So however you set up your first one, these options are going to overwrite these fields in your link script. Okay.
Great. One of the other things, and I'm not sure if it's something we could fit in today, or perhaps it's an idea for another session, but someone wrote that they've seen examples where all of the activities sort of running from Excel itself, and wondering what that looks like compared to what you're showing today.
I would want to clarify using the Excel add-in or using macros. So whoever maybe asked that, if you want to type in if you're looking at running through macros or using the Excel add-in from Winshuttle, then I might be able to clarify. So if you want to answer that real quick in the chat window.
Yep. Why don't you proceed, and then as we get more information, we'll. She was saying actually the add-in.
The add-in. Okay. Yep. We've done everything. Yep. We've done everything from the GUI, but many of these things work from the add-in. We'll see if we can squeak that in. All of these functions work the same way from the add-in. It's just I have to publish it. So it takes an extra step of publishing the script to the Excel file or to Central, and then I can download it. So I'm using Central. So I would publish this script, and we'll give that a shot if we have time. But I think that might be a good topic for another session, because we can get into a little bit more detail. But I'll try to cover that at a high level towards the end here.
Great. Thanks, Liz.
Okay. So we have using Excel expressions. Okay, yeah, this is something that I get frustrated with every now and then. I've spent a bunch of time recording a script, and I use a particular mode. I've gone through the script ahead of time, mapped out my steps. I need to click this button, then I need to go to that tab, then I need to update this field and hit that button. These complex transactions. You think you get it right, and then when you play it back, that doesn't work. And that's always frustrating. It takes all that time to plan, and you think you did everything right, and then it doesn't work. So we've already looked at the first tip in this section, which is manually updating the mapper to change the transaction. So we went from MMO2 to an MMO1 in this case. So let's say we have a scenario now where I want to download some information. So first, let me change this back to an MMO2 T code. Hit save. All right, so now I'm back to MMO2. And not only did I want to update the MRP for the storage location, I also wanted to download some information. Okay, so we have the ability to download information from SAP at the T code level as well. So let's see what might be something good to download here. So let's take a look at storage location MRP indicator. Make sure, yep, so that should be at the right T code. All right, DISKZ. Let's say I wanted to bring that down. So let's go to unfilter everything so I can see all the fields that were touched. All right, where did I get to that last screen? All right. So somewhere on this screen, there it is, storage location MRP indicator. Let's say I wanted to download that. I did all this work. Now, obviously, this is a very simple one, but say you're doing sales orders and you've gone through the whole step of creating the sales orders and it's a complicated T code, and then you forgot that after you got it to work, you wanted to download the item number that was created. So I would just check the box, then maybe pick a column over here to download to, column I, and then you can, I can't do that. I get the no. Well, it turns out in batch mode, you can't download records from SAP. So you've done all this work, mapped your T code successfully, everything's working, then you realize, you know what, I need to do something else I forgot about. I wanted to download this. Well, now it doesn't work because I recorded in a mode that doesn't support downloading. Okay. Well, there is hope. Instead of spending all the time recording that again, let's go back to the mapper and take a look at some of these other cryptic bits of information here. So as we looked at, the plus TX is the transaction you're looking at, and all these other things here. What Excel file am I going to? So what's the data source? In Excel, in transaction, we use a data source to load data up. In a query, we use the destination file to pull data down, where we're going to pull it down to. So this is data source. I'm using Excel, right? So my mapping is Excel. This is the file that I'm using. This is the start row, the end row, and a bit of other information. All this stuff down here is my mapping. But the one we want to look at is this BI1. The plus BI indicates batch input. All right, so when I recorded this in batch input mode, it says batch input mode is set to a 1. Okay, so let's exit this. I think I've saved it as a MMO2 already. So let's go take a look at this again. Yes. All right, you can see the mode up here is batch mode. Okay, I want to change that to non-batch input mode because I want to download some fields from the transaction. So let's go back to the editor. And I'm going to change this to a 0. Right, so if you think like true and false as a 1 and 0, batch input set to a 1, sort of means true, and batch input mode set to a 0 means false. So it's not batch input mode, it's non-batch input mode. So we'll go ahead and save that. Okay, now let's exit. Now you can see I'm in non-batch mode now. Now let's take a look and see if I can download that. See if this will work. I've actually not tried this, so we'll give it a shot. So I've indicated right here what I want to do. There we go. So downloaded. I didn't write the column header, but it allowed me to do it now. So I drug that down in there, and I no longer have the no symbol. All right, so if I wanted to, then I could save this, and I could run it again, and it would download that information. So I don't think any of these really had anything in it. But the real tip is just to show you that you can change input modes. Now I haven't figured out how to go from non-batch without controls to with controls. I don't think that's possible. I think there are other configuration settings in the background that are not exposed. So if you needed to do long text, that's where you would use batch mode or non-batch mode with controls. In that case, if you want to switch between those modes, unfortunately it is a re-recording situation. But it's handy to at least give it a shot. If you've done something in batch mode and you realize it's not working, instead of starting over and re-recording in non-batch mode, just go in there and flip that indicator and see if it works. Again, I recommend saving prior to doing that, saving off a copy, so you can update other items and make sure you can revert back to that. But it's one of those things to save yourself a little bit of stress. And you're not this person up here after you've done all that recording. You're this person because you've switched a 0 to a 1, and now it works.
Lance, I didn't see you sneak in my office to take that picture.
Are you that peaceful?
The
Okay.
one before.
Oh, this one. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that sort of ends the tips and tricks that we wanted to cover today. Let's take a look real quick at Central, since that came up. And let's see if I can get to our test central place. Are there any other questions out there right now, Beth?
No, well, actually, just a comment, which is great feedback, that perhaps in another session we cover Central, and when you're working with solutions that have multiple non-linked scripts, how to modify them and use revision in Central and kind of that whole picture.
Okay, yep, that's a good idea. Always looking for new topics because after a while we're going to have to repeat. You know, we've done this now 6 or 7 times, so always looking for new items to cover that people are interested in. So if I go to Central and I have transaction scripts here, actually I want to look at data templates, data files. Okay. All right, so these are the data templates. When you submit something to Central, not only do you submit the script to Central, you must also submit the data template that is used to support that transaction. You also have to submit that to Central. So let's go ahead and download this. I'm going to download a copy. Let's put it on my particular folder. And we'll put it right there. Okay, so this is something that I've published, and we'll take a look. You know, not really being prepared in advance. Let's use the transaction plugin here, or the add-in. All right, so now that I've published this script to Central, not only did it publish that script and I could route it for approval within the Central environment, it published that script into the data template Excel file. So now I can download that template, and if there are multiple revisions of that, so if you made a change to your script, if you use that same template name, it will overwrite the existing template name and create a new version. So SharePoint will keep the version history, so if you ever need to revert back, you're able to do that. But when a user goes to the Central site to download a version, it'll always be the latest version. So inside of that, I have the ability to update and run that script right from here. So if I have this example, you know, we'll just go ahead and run this. These options here are very similar to what we see on the GUI. So if I'm looking at what file, obviously we don't need to worry about the file because we're running it right from the add-in. Start row, end row, sheet name, log column, those types of things, and the run options are right there in the screen. So if I want to run this now, change to end row of 0, and we'll go ahead and test this because it's going to go against the non-production environment most likely. Provide a log column name. All right, log column, let's go. Oh, that's very interesting. Well, let me change the log column here. Okay. So I think I may have messed it up by not having it there, or maybe not submitting it with a log column. So that would have been an issue there. But this is how you would run from the Excel file, assuming I'd published it correctly. After it was published and approved, I could download this data template and start running it from here. There is something that's pretty neat, the filtered items. So if I have a whole bunch of items here and I want to filter, maybe I just want to filter on particular ones to show. I only want to show those. You can use this run rows as specified, which is the start row and end row, or I can say filtered. So because I'm filtered, it would only run these 4 items. So it will acknowledge my filter and only run those 4 items. So if you have things that you added in or you didn't want to run, if you filtered on them by using the run rows that are filtered, it would only run those rows that you have visibly displayed on your screen. If you have something filtered and use the as specified below, it would still run all of the rows, even though some of them are filtered. So it would still do 2 through 25 or whatever the last row is here. But if I do select as filtered, it would just run these three items here. So many of the features that we looked at in transaction from a runtime perspective are available through the Excel add-ins, and you could run query and transaction as add-ins if you have those installed on your desktop or wherever you access your Winshuttle tools. But for a lot of the tricks that we talked about today and that we cover are more on the design side. So I can't really update my transaction script here. So if I had a problem and wanted to change it from an MMO2 to an MMO1 T code by going in and updating the mapping editor manually, I couldn't do that via the Excel file because I don't have access to the script. It's just the script is embedded in here and it's going to run however it's set up. I would have to go back to the transaction design tool, make my updates there, and republish that. There are options when you go to publish if you want multiple scripts to be embedded in a single Excel file. When you go publish, you have the option to publish multiple files. So I could add transaction scripts here if I wanted to. Are they different? Yeah, like V2. So I could put in V2 there, for example. And when I publish these to Central, it will get published as a multi-script. But in that Excel file, so I'm going to go next. I'm missing some descriptions in my T codes. But as I would go, as I would publish this, both of these transaction scripts would be embedded in that Excel file. So then when I go download that template, when I'm using the Excel file, I would have multiple scripts that I could select from. So this one only has transaction script for T code MMO2. But if I had published using this multiple option, if I publish using multiple, I would have both of these scripts coming in here. I see what it doesn't like.
Lance, technically, can you modify the script for what you need in the embedded tab?
No, you cannot modify the scripts through the Excel file. Because it's just a reference to the script, and it'll go to Central and call that version of the script, I believe. Okay, there we go. So now we can go next, and I would be able to provide this Excel file. So when I submit this, both of those scripts would be edited or embedded in that Excel file to Central, and when I download that from Central, they should both be there.
Well, it sounds like some of these are great things to carry on to a future topic for sure.
Yep, we are running short on time here, and we could do a whole topic on using the Excel add-in. So I think that'd be a good topic to use. All right.
Thank you, everybody out there, for all of your comments and questions. It makes the session a lot more fun for us too. So appreciate that.
All right, and just wrapping up here, again, thanks everyone for joining us today on this session, the last transaction and query session that we're going to be doing for this year. And as always, keep the ideas coming. I think there might be a survey afterwards. If you have any ideas, just put them in there. Every month we get new people, so I'm hesitant to repeat things, but so I'm always looking for new ideas for the next topic. So just before we end here, I want to give you an idea of one of the products that Clear Process Solution offers called Solution Care. And what Solution Care is, it's a block hour support program that you can buy blocks of hours a month to help augment your staff. So if you're finding that you need training opportunities or help doing scripts because there's just more work than your department can handle, those types of block hours support can be used for that. So you can say, Lance, we're going to buy 10 hours a month, and you can use those 10 hours for anything. It can be SharePoint support, it could be script writing, form and workflow updates, things like that. So all of these things that are here in the checkbox, those are things that are covered in the Solution Care hours. So this is just something to consider within your organization. And the tips and tricks is offered as a free service to those folks that are enrolled in that program, as well as to new folks that we meet and invite along the way, like many of you may be here today for the first time. So with that, I think that is it. Do we have any events coming up? We do. So next month, December 18th, we have the form and workflow tips and tricks. So again, every other month we alternate between transaction and the desktop tools and workflow. So next month is the month for workflow just before Christmas.
Lance, I think what I'm going to do now, I know people probably have some time constraints and may need to go, but I've unmuted Bill because there were some questions around some of the things we were doing that it might be easiest for you guys to just talk through.
Hey, Lance.
Yes.
Hey, I'm just curious on that embedded tab in column B. It appears to me that the whole embedded script is there and that he doesn't actually pull it from central again when he executes it. He actually is executing the embedded script. So could you look in column B on your template that you had for central and see if indeed that's the embedded script? Because it looks just like what you were showing through transaction when you were updating the B1 through 3 or whatever it was.
So in this particular,
can I show my screen? If you let me show my screen.
Sure, let's go ahead and do that.
All right.
Let's see, I don't think I can make somebody that's not, I can have minimal options here.
An organizer.
Yeah, since we're doing a webinar instead of a go-to meeting, it's I don't have that option.
So just open up your embedded shuttles tab, unhide it, open it, and look in column B for the script that's listed there.
Okay, so I need to do view maybe, unhide.
Yeah, you want to go down to your tab and do right-click and unhide.
Oh, unhide sheets. Embedded shuttle files.
Perfect.
Yep.
And go to B. Just go to B right now. B, and then right there, yeah. And then open that up at the top so you can see all the information that's in there. No, the top, the right-hand side, you can open up that. Yeah, there you go. Beautiful. See, here's what I've been told. I've been told that this embedded script is what gets executed regardless of how many additional versions I've revised it. That was one of the things that I talked to Winshuttle about. So I just wanted to point that out, that it appeared to me that, but I didn't see where you could modify the log column in your particular case.
So the log column is one of those things. So that's a great thing. I don't really use the Excel add-in that much because I'm always developing.
So we use it heavily, so that's the only reason I brought it up to you. I thought you might want to know this. And because we had a big issue with this with Winshuttle and the fact that this basically allows old scripts to continue to be executed and doesn't force the customer to pull a new one.
Yeah, that is.
So we're always cognizant of that when we publish scripts.
Yep.
Because my issue to Winshuttle is you shouldn't, when we're tied to Central, you shouldn't do this anymore. You should always go pull the latest version.
Yeah, that's the whole point of Central, right? To manage the versions of the scripts.
But the problem with that, it gets a lot more complicated than that. I happen to side with Winshuttle on this because then other issues come into play if you do that. Because now you're running a template that was built through an older script. If you added additional columns, they won't be in this template, right?
Right.
You'll be executing a new script. So I understand that, but sometimes I would love to sit down with Winshuttle and go over the whole central model, especially from revisioning everything else, to figure out if we can have a forward game plan that's going to satisfy the requirements. Okay, great. We use this heavily. We love it. Don't get me wrong here. I just thought I'd point that out.
Hey, that's always learning something new. So I did not realize the script itself is embedded right in there. So if you wanted to, you could do some of those things. Like right here, you see that's a batch.
And keep in mind, this is a throwback. This is a throwback before Central came, right?
Yep.
So this would give us the ability to just send a workbook to the customer, but they kind of just built it into Winshuttle, made Winshuttle work with it, but they haven't gone back and readdressed that concept. When you're using Central, you probably shouldn't be doing this. But anyway.
Yep.
Or you should, but maybe there should be a warning to the customer that says, just to let you know there's a newer version out on Central if you want to download it in the future, but I'll go ahead and run this for you now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Something like that.
Yep.
All right,
at least
Lance,
make them aware.
Thanks. You guys are doing great work. I love this service, and in fact, there's some other thought processes that I need to start talking to my business about, possibly utilizing the services that you're basically advertising doing this.
Perfect.
But we appreciate it immensely. You've given me so many tips already, and I'm trying to push all my developers to participate in these on a regular basis.
Well, I really appreciate that feedback. It's nice to hear another voice at the end of these things as I just talked to the screen for an hour. So I appreciate the willingness to want to talk here today and come forward with a new tip for everybody. So thanks, Bill.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Thank you.